So this is the midpoint of the season. We are 5 episodes in. There are 5 left. I think this episode did a pretty good job in terms of getting us to a good midpoint, almost season finale-esque episode, because clearly next week we're going to have a one-off episode that I think is going to focus purely on the Korean storyline. So what do you guys think of the first 5 episodes? let's summarize our feelings with those, and then we'll get into this review.
This one was my least favorite so far, only because I felt like it was a network show almost, where this was one of those filler episodes where they kind of drop a couple hints, but they could have done it in a much shorter period of time, and given us more important stuff. So this one almost felt like a filler episode, which I didn't like as much. However, the hints that they did drop were pretty big deals. Like, they were very important going forward. I also, like I said, last week was my favorite episode. All in all, this whole season, I've enjoyed every episode. This one I enjoyed the least, but that doesn't mean that I didn't like it. It was still really good, but it just had, and we've talked about it, each episode has almost like a different vibe. And
Yes.
This one I didn't care for as much as the other 4.
Yeah, this one, I enjoyed it. I mean, I was entertained the whole way through. I wasn't, well, there wasn't as much to theorize about. There wasn't as much mystery or intrigue as there were in the other episodes. It was still entertaining, however, and there's just not a whole lot to make out about it. We didn't create a lot of new plot lines to follow. We didn't close any chapters or follow up on even the existing storylines, but we did get to see. Well, we just kind of got to see them in their hometown, with what is the new normal for these characters, and that's about it. I mean, that is still pretty weird, but it didn't add a whole lot. That said, I still enjoyed it.
Ruby's new norm is fucked up then. Damn.
Yeah, it is. It is very fucked up, and
Yeah, I agree. I thought this, for me, was a little on the weaker side as far as the episodes, but with that said, I was engaged the full hour. Like, there was
Same
never
here.
a point where I was not invested in the story. But you're right. I take notes on all these episodes, and I try to condense them into about a page for an outline when we discuss these things. Usually I have about a full page. This one I have like half, because at the end of the day, you have the 3 plot lines. You had the Ruby story, which had a little more going on, but the Atticus Letty story you can summarize in a couple sentences. Same with Montrose. We're going to get into all that, and we're going to talk about it, but I would say a little less happened in this episode, although it had some of the greatest effects of the entire 5 episodes.
I gotta agree with
thus
that.
far.
You can definitely see the budget kicking in this episode, but it does feel like you could have almost left Letty and Atticus out, and
Yes.
like we could have started with their plot line maybe in the next episode when we're ready to follow up with that and continue looking for the pieces of the book and everything.
You could have, absolutely. So yeah, welcome to Pulp Mythos. I'm Brian here with Spencer and Larry. We review Lovecraft Country every Sunday night. We're also doing Raised by Wolves and The Boys. A lot of movie reviews coming up in October, and we've just discussed. We're pretty sure we're going to be doing Fargo season 4. So look for that. I'd like to give a shout out. There was a lot of comments in last week's Lovecraft Country video. Great ones. I read every single one of them. A lot of great discussions. So Hub the Poet, Gerald Walker, Nikki Ward, Lydia Moon, KB, the Richard Cheney who used to comment on our Perry Mason stuff. We appreciate all the comments. Keep them coming. We enjoy that kind of stuff, and we definitely do read them. So yeah, Ruby was the center of the episode. Great storyline, and I have to say, let's just go right into the effects. The metamorphosis effect of transitioning, whether she's becoming the white woman, Dell, or what was it, Hillary Davenport, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That's what. Or obviously the revelation at the end. Might as well say it now. Christina into William. Uh, the effects were amazing. Specifically, the one in the alleyway where they really went into it. Yeah. What was your thoughts on what was happening? Were you confused in the beginning, or what did you guys think about that?
I thought it was a flashback at first because I could have swore, and I think we confirmed it. And I guess we'll talk more on this a little bit later. That the person that we saw in the beginning was the sheriff from episode 2. And then when she said get it together, Ruby, or whatever it was she said to herself, I was like, okay, something's going on here. Ruby's in her body somehow. What's going on? So it was a little disorienting at first, and then when she gets out of the bed and everything, I was like, okay, right. She started out in William's house, but how did this happen? Why would William do this to her? It was. I mean, I don't know. It moves so fast that I guess it's meant to make you sort of. It's meant to put you in the mood that she's in, which is just kind of confused, and it's a very kind of confused and panicky scene.
I I like the intro because I was not sure that was what they were going to do by any means. They equated it to like butterflies and all kinds of like all the metaphors and stuff. At first, I had no idea where they were going to go with it. Clearly, they were leading to the Christina William part at the end, and how many times does she use this? How many is she still using it? Like it's almost like Polyjuice Potion from Harry Potter, but really gross.
Right.
But I really did uh, enjoy, like Brian said, the effects were amazing when she was in the alleyway and like peeling her skin off and stuff. That it was so gross. Like I paused it and rewound it and watched it again. Called my wife into the room, was like, "Hey, look at this!" And of course, she didn't like it, but I thought it was funny. But
It was surprisingly gory.
yeah. And at the beginning, I really didn't know if it was like when we were talking about the harem stuff. I didn't know if it like he transplanted her brain or just her personality somehow. I mean, they use magic for all kinds of shit. So the amount of things that could have happened to make her be in that person's body, I didn't know which route they took. But I was pleasantly surprised that they took the grossest route possible.
She ends up as Hillary Davenport goes to the store she's been trying to work at with her resume, and they're blown away by it and they think it's amazing and they want to make her an assistant director or whatever manager or whatever. This episode highlighted the idea of systematic racism and the fact that she was completely qualified for the job, but because of the color of her
Right.
skin, she was never able to get it. And that's sort of one of the main themes that runs through this entire episode, and it plays through with her and Tamara, the character Tamara, her and the white women. So that's played out throughout the episode. How did y'all feel as far as how the episode handled that storyline? And we'll talk about where it ends at the end a little later. But as far as with the manager, yeah. But yeah, what was your thoughts on that element of the episode?
I liked how they approached it. The when she was talking to Tamara several different times, she was anticipating that she was educated or smart, and she wasn't. And I don't know if they put her in that role because that she was unsmart, or if they just hired the first person because they were trying to meet a quota or something like that. I don't I don't know exactly why they hired Tamara, but
I
when
think
she showed how smart she was, and started talking about taking night classes and all these things, I think Tamara felt that she didn't have those same opportunities, which was probably correct. She probably didn't. So I thought it was very interesting to see like both sides of those coins, and it also made me think of how you know how much money that they have, because you talk about how Letty got an inheritance, which she didn't get. We know it was Christina that paid for that house, but how much money did she have to be able to take those classes? Was that given to her by her mother? How much of an advantage did they have over some of the other people uh, in their community just because of maybe how well off their mother was. I don't know. But I did enjoy how they approached it, um, and it was a crazy ride throughout. And Ruby getting her uh, justice there at the end was pretty awesome.
Like, well, it seems to me like they maybe grew up in roughly the same area and probably had roughly the same resources to some degree because she Ruby in the episode where Letty inherits the house and everything, she didn't seem to believe. She thought it was unbelievable that their mother had that kind of money. Because correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Letty mention that their mother just disappeared one day? That
Yes. Yeah. She
it seems like
abandoned
that
her.
they grew up maybe about as wealthy as Atticus and everybody else in the neighborhood, but she just abandoned them at some point. And so I don't think they grew up with riches. I think that the assumption was on Ruby's part that at some point in her life, after she abandoned them, her mother came across some money and left it to Letty for some reason. What I think this was, and I think what they were trying to show is that when they hired the store clerk that they did, that it was in a way an act of sabotage on the manager's part, just to go, see, this isn't going to work. We can hire as many as we want. It'll never be right. He didn't choose the person who was educated or had those typing classes and everything that she mentioned, or had the training for the business. He hired the person that he knew would probably fail.
Oh, and I also think now that you mentioned that too, towards the end when the boss tried to sexually assault her, maybe that was also why, because she was only had a seventh grade education. This was probably the only job she, you know, not eligible for, but the only place that did hire her. So maybe he felt like he had control over her because she was
It was
uneducated and everything else too.
right. It was the best job that she could probably get in that area with
And
a
he
seventh
held it
grade
over her
education.
head.
Held it over her head, and he thought, and he knew that there would probably be no consequences for his actions, you know, given the power dynamic.
We get. I'm gonna go ahead and jump toward the last parts of Ruby's story before we get into the other stuff. Because, like I said, she was basically the bulk of the episode. So yeah, she gets revenge on the manager for that sexual assault, and it's so brutal. I mean, what was brutal? I mean, the act of what she was doing to him with the heel of the shoe. They were very visually showing it. The camera, didn't really pull away. It was a very graphic scene. Uh, yeah, I don't know what the whole episode was very graphic. The effects, the gore, the torture, obviously the scene in the closet, which we'll talk about right after this. Yeah, what did you think about just that whole sequence?
I don't know. I was pretty on board with it. Like I was. It was one of
I'll
those
say
things where
I'm
it
sorry
was.
before you continue. I read a review, I believe IGN. They were not happy about the scene. They felt it was too aggressive as far as what Ruby was doing, and it's sort of similar to Montrose last week. You took a character and they committed a really heinous act, and they weren't happy about it. So I just give you that's a discussion happening in
Fuck
some reviews.
IGN.
Right.
I'm just
They,
saying. I'm just letting you know.
but to me, we don't know enough about Ruby yet either. So we don't know if something like that happened to her. We don't know if she was sexually assaulted. We don't know enough about Ruby yet. Um, I think that if something like that may have happened to her, she may have been taking out all this pent up aggression or all this stuff on somebody who had it coming, because I don't think this was the first time, and there's no proof. It doesn't make it okay, even if it was this guy's first time doing what he did. But I think him doing that to me showed, just like Larry said, hire her because she's the most uneducated,
The
you
most
know,
vulnerable.
the most vulnerable. So now he can hold it over her head. So who's to say that's the first person, white or black, that he's done that to? And I imagine that he's done it to several, because if you look at when Ruby and Hillary's form, I guess, was asking the ladies, "Hey, has he ever, flirted with any of you?" two of them said no, and they were kind of it. At first, I wasn't sure, but they were pretty serious about it. But the one that was in the blue dress with the brown hair, not the one wearing the coat, but the other one, she didn't say anything, and she wouldn't look at him. So I
Right.
think that he may have done something to her as well, and he was also flirting with Ruby as the white lady. So like, I think that he was doing this systematically to many different people. So when she did that, I mean, she went overboard, but I was not on board with it. I wasn't. I had zero issue with her doing that.
Right. Yeah, because it's the sort of thing where, and I get what you're saying. Even if she hasn't experienced it firsthand, given the environment we see that they're in, and the way that people of color are treated, uh, we we get the idea that especially with the level of violence we're shown in this show, and even with Ruby from the perspective of when she's Hillary, and and observing it as Hillary, we get the idea of that maybe if she hasn't experienced it firsthand, she's seen too much of this and she's fed up. But on the other hand, I do see what IGN is kind of saying to a degree, because from what we've seen of Ruby so far, she doesn't seem like a violent person to any degree. Like, she doesn't seem, well, even though this would be her being pushed maybe to a limit, she doesn't seem like the type of person that would lash out in this way.
But that's why I was going back to saying that I think maybe something may have happened to her, because any traumatic experience on anybody's part, when you relive that experience,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's through seeing it happen to somebody else or it happening again to you, it fucks with you. So like, if you saw somebody get killed in front of you or commit suicide or something, so to even hear people talk about that, it bothers you. Drunk driving, like, there's a lot of things that create emotions in people that make them act out of character, and I think that that's what gave me more of a feeling that something had happened to her previously, because the way she reacted, it
Mm-hmm.
was it was thought out. Like, she didn't just like instinctually do this.
That was
As
planned.
Yeah, she, as soon as it
Oh,
happened,
very
she
much.
planned that, like, piece by piece, where she knew the little
The
formula stuff was going to run out right when she was doing it and everything.
the favor. So she, William. She has a conversation with William, and keep calling him William for now, while he's in that form. It's Christina, but she's like, and she's well aware at this point. Okay, this is magic. You're giving me, things I want. What is the deal I've made with the devil? She's very aware that there's a cost. There's something that's going to be paid, and that is infiltrating the lodge in that area where the police sheriff runs it, and hiding a stone with some kind of symbol on it inside of his desk. How that's going to play out, we'll find out eventually. But in that scene, we see several things. First, a guy with his throat slit in a closet, yet still alive, tongue missing, being tortured, whatever. Don't know what that's about. We see the sheriff with his shirt off, and we notice that he is multiple people sewn together. He appears to, as Larry, you have a theory. I think Spencer, you disagreed. I honestly don't know if I agree with either of you. Yet I don't have a better theory.
Right.
So
But
I don't really know where it's going. But I definitely want you guys to discuss what we talked about, before we started recording.
okay, well, what we see is, as far as we know, because we see above the waist, with the exception of his head, neck, and hands, is that the sheriff appears to be composed of he appears to be a black man, and so my theory would be then that Hiram, which I believe is the name of the doctor, right? Isn't the doctor Hiram?
I can't remember, but
I think so.
we'll say mad scientist.
I would say,
Yeah.
yeah, people are going to get mad about it, but I'm going to say Hiram right now. Okay, so Hiram, he, he made a deal with some of the locals to infiltrate the lodge, and that perhaps even he killed the original sheriff and grafted his face over the face of one of the black members of this community in order to infiltrate that lodge, and not just the sheriff maybe, but also his two henchmen as well. I think it's that this very exclusionary lodge, much like the one we saw in Arden, which is composed, what was previously composed entirely of white men, you know, that these gentlemen are using Hiram's techniques in order to infiltrate their lodge.
Even though I have a different theory, I don't necessarily disagree because, like I said, we don't have a whole lot to go on other than seeing him without a shirt on. But seeing the previous episodes, episode 3, they showed we call them the baby headed man, like the baby head on top of the torso of the giant basketball player. I think that it's either the sheriff's head or a white guy's head. Like, I don't know who he was previously, but a white guy's head and arms kind of Frankensteined onto a black man's torso. I don't know whether or not their brains were swapped or if it's the white guy's brain versus the African American guy whose torso they're using's brain. I don't know. I think that the only reason, and Larry had a different theory with that too.
Well, yeah, that it was more advantageous, to them.
Yeah, I just don't think that how he was treating Letty and Atticus would have led me to believe that he was not a.
I see what you're saying.
Head, because the way he treated Letty and Atticus is kind of this almost like prophet type person because he's he has the blood, what are they called, the sons of Adam? Yeah, the sons of Adam were.
I don't know who all knows that though.
I don't either.
Yeah, because it could have just been the Arden Lodge that knows that. But I think I see what you're saying. You're saying are you saying because of the way that the ghost of the doctor treated him, or are you saying because of the way that the sheriff was treating them?
All of the above,
or both.
Both.
Now see the sheriff, in my opinion, him treating them that way, it could have been, just basically, well, that could have been mob mentality, like not mob is in group, but mob is in mobster mentality on his part, just trying to keep them away from his secrets and everything. Because if he's doing what I think he's doing, he's going about. I mean, he's going about in a much stealthier way, and he may have had this planned, for years and years, and may well have no idea, like Brian was saying, who Atticus is, and even if he did, bringing Atticus in would likely ruin his plans in some way.
Well, and if he was, I think he was one of Hiram's successful experiments. I don't think that somebody else did this. I think that Hiram created him. Because remember, there's a lot of pictures of him with the Hiram guy.
Yes.
He was already his number 2. So I think that he was one of Hiram's successful experiments. Like, I don't know why he did that. I legit have no idea yet. But I think that he was one of his successful magical Frankenstein experiment.
We've been dancing around the idea of, Christina as William, they're the same person, but she says something interesting to Ruby in that she says William was the rightful heir to that lodge, and then they tried to kill him. I ran him off a road or something, but they don't realize he's still around. Was William a real person, and did he get killed? And you know what I mean? Like that's an interest. And how does that play with this lodge, or did she just make that up? I think that was probably one of the biggest, next to the thing at the end with Atticus and the translation. That was probably one of the biggest reveals in the episode. If, in fact, William was a person, who was he? What's the importance of him, if any? And, what did that mean? Do you guys think she was lying, or do you think that that's something that legit happened?
Well, there's a couple of different things that this could mean. She could be telling the truth, and William could have been a person, and she could have used whatever method she's using to just sort of skinwalk. I'm just going to call it that. Like to use William's skin. It could have been a real person. Could have been someone who was about to inherit that lodge. William could have been her in disguise from the whole time that they've known him. and she could have just worked her ways up of their rank as William before she was betrayed, and they shot him or tried to run him off of a bridge. But because of, well, we know she's immortal. You know, she inherited, not inherited, but learned that spell from her father. Uh, so we know she's immortal. So they could have tried to kill her as William, and so she laid low for a little bit. You know, or like you're saying, she could have just been lying to Ruby in order to further her goals. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I don't know for certain if William was or is even around. There's nothing to say whether or not these people don't still exist, because how I think that the way the potions work is similar to, like, and I mentioned it again just because I think it's kind of funny, the polyjuice potion. How else would they make a potion that makes you look like somebody that already exists? You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not creating a new form or making you look like something that you want, because Ruby never met that sheriff lady. She never met the real Hillary prior to that. So it's not a form that Ruby wanted to take to be white. It was a form that was given to her. So do they have, parts of their hair, body, skin? Is it the way that they mix the potion? We don't know enough about that. So it may be that William is still around. They may be doubling up William just so that they have, they can both infiltrate, they can both work, they can both do different things. Or he may have died, and, she's using her access to him to, create those potions or whatever. I have no idea. I think that explaining to us how they do those potions would help us a lot, but they're not in a hurry to tell us that bit of information just yet, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I'm glad you made that Harry Potter reference because I was wondering, since we figured out how it worked and we had the potions and everything, like we know we were told earlier that it takes an entire lifetime to develop one spell, and she clearly her father developed the immortality thing. Does this count as a spell, the whole transformation thing she does, or is this more like an alchemy thing?
It's Snape.
Yeah.
Snape taught her how to do it.
the when the early in the episode, Montrose and Letty confront, not excuse Montrose, Atticus and Letty confront Montrose, and Atticus figures it out immediately that what happened, that he disposed of the siren and the pages, and he beats the shit out of Montrose, and very well appears like he's going to kill him. And he even says later that he's not really sure. It scared him, that level of violence could come out of him. And then he gives a little discussion about how he discovered it in the war, and was able to use it. So he's dealing with a lot of abuse basically.
Yeah.
And he talks about how he played it in his mind many times, killing Montrose. And so on the one hand, and then he tells Letty later that in fact, yes, that's what happened. She was a little naive to it, didn't realize it, but he quickly knew. And it disturbed her because she's like, well, what is this thing doing to us? So that was several different scenes and a lot to unpack. But as far as that storyline of Atticus assaulting Montrose, almost killing him, and how that plays into Letty and Atticus's relationship, it was minimal. There wasn't a whole lot for those characters in this episode, but that was basically what we had. What'd y'all think of that?
I think that it's in, like I said, the parts of the episode that were important, they did a great job kind of highlighting those things. And that's why I was talking about felt like a filler episode, because parts of it, the parts that were important were highlighted greatly, and then there's a lot of parts that they kind of stretched out that I felt didn't matter and weren't important to the plot. But I did, feel that it was very important to kind of uh, show that Atticus is not a whole lot different than Montrose as far as uh, his mentality is, because he's very driven at this point. He is almost like a man possessed. Like, he is, gung ho about this stuff, which he didn't give two shits about until very recently. So, does that mean that, after he was getting ready to be sacrificed and saw this stuff, that this is what's now his mission, is what's possessing him? Or is, this is just something that, because at the very end of the episode, they showed the whole Korean part, is he tying this all now into this like prophecy type thing that this lady told him? Like, I don't know if he's like connecting dots that we just haven't quite seen yet or what, but I thought it was very interesting the way that they kind of pieced it together piece by piece.
Yeah, and it seems to be Atticus kind of following in Montrose's footsteps in a way, whether he knows it or not. I'm glad you mentioned that they're a lot alike in certain ways, because that's very true. The way that Montrose just kind of shuts him out and doesn't give him information and tries to manipulate things behind the scenes with Atticus. Atticus does the same thing with Letty and everyone else. So it's kind of a cycle that they're repeating in a way. And what Montrose did was, well, that's more crossing the line. That's definitely more so crossing the line than what Ruby did, in my opinion. He literally just sliced the person's throat in order to shield his son from the truth, rather than, let him figure it out himself. I mean, it was a very weird scene from the last episode, because my thought was, when it happened, it's like, well, Atticus is going to figure this out right away, and how do you recover from this? How do these people live in the same area, work together, to further this plot and not kill each other?
You want to know something really cool about
because
Omar?
just they left someone alone with him for like what, 5 minutes before he sliced her throat. He didn't hesitate. He just decided, no, to keep these secrets right away. I'm going to kill this person. So the question becomes, is it Montrose protecting Atticus, or is it Montrose shielding everyone from some personal truth about himself or his wife? What is he protecting everyone from? If he's protecting anyone at all, I'm not sure whether or not he has his own agenda at this point.
What were you gonna say?
Oh, Michael K. Williams. I was reading the IMDb page and like looking at different stuff. He is like a super duper method actor. Like one of the roles he was in, the director loved The Wire so much he gave him like a cameo just because he was a Wire fan. But in 2004, like after The Wire was over, he had to go to rehab because he became addicted to cocaine, just like Omar was. So he had to.
Oh, that's a mistake.
Well, I just was like, holy shit! Like I didn't know that he was a method actor. I like him in everything that he's been in, and he's a great actor. But I didn't know that he was a Daniel Day-Lewis type. Like he takes over that role, and I was like, holy shit.
Well, speaking of Michael K. Williams, so we were given hints in the last episode that Montrose had a relationship with Sammy, the guy that owns the bar, and in this episode, that in fact is the case. But they play the story out where clearly they have a sexual relationship, but Sammy seems to want more. But then there's the whole line about they've never kissed, and so we get a sequence at the end in which I will praise the musical choice and the way it was shot. Last week I was, complaining about the music. I thought the music was handled a lot better in this episode, especially in that sequence. Very well played. And they get the kiss. And, so it was interesting. Those two seem to have come together as a couple. And then we had Atticus and Letty came together as a couple. So those were sort of two romances that were playing side by side in the episode with those characters. What did y'all think as far as the music and that sequence in Montrose's storyline with Sammy?
Well, yeah, I thought, good for Montrose, or at least it would be good for Montrose if Montrose wasn't a cold-blooded killer. If he didn't slice somebody's throat,
yes. Well, that goes to, so real quick, going back to the review I had read. that was a complaint. You know, a lot of you want to root for him. You sort of like the guy, but at the same time, yes, he is a cold-blooded killer. He committed a horrible act in the last episode,
And he's not exactly
and that
explaining
it is
himself.
what it is. You know, no, and he's not. You're right.
Yeah, he was a giant piece of shit father, and like, so for him to have this like happy moment, it's it's odd because like prior to this episode, I could give two shits about Montrose. Like I didn't dislike him as an actor, but I dislike his character. Like I'm like, fuck that guy.
Right.
But this episode, it was the opposite. They're trying to get you to kind of root for him. So I'm all kinds of confused. It makes me re-question the previous episodes. Not so much why he was a shitty dad, because
Do you think
he was,
that's a poor in terms of trying to convince an audience? Okay, this guy is a bad guy, but no, he's really good. Or how do you feel as far as the writing of the character? Or
that's what I'm saying. I actually like the writing because now after this episode, prior to this episode, I'm like, he's a shitty father. He's a piece of shit. He killed this person. But after seeing this episode and seeing like I said, Michael K. Williams, he's a great actor. And, his face, his anguish, his like pain. And then finally by the end of the episode, it's like he lets it go and he's happy for a moment. So to see that
he's at
now,
peace, like
Yeah.
that with who he is. Yes, absolutely, I agree.
so I think that when he met, Atticus's mom, obviously he's gay, so he doesn't like. I don't think that it was one of those he's going through the motions type things. But I also think that he has always, although he's done it wrong and he beat the shit out of Atticus, and he's not a good person. I think that he's always been trying to protect Atticus.
Yes. Again, this is him, repeating a cycle. Montrose, like I said, Atticus was doing, Montrose is doing what his father did. He thinks he's protecting his son. He thinks he's helping his son, but he's hurting him a great deal by keeping these secrets, by, just trying to burn every lead that Atticus has. So it was, even though this is supposed to be Montrose's moment, it was hard to root for him at all. It was sort of a scene where I felt, yeah, good for Sammy, but not good for Montrose.
Yeah, yes.
Well, and I think it also gives you like not necessarily rooting for him, but it gives you an explanation. Even when somebody does some fucked up shit, you don't always forgive them, or you don't always still are just like, well, it's okay now because now they're redeemable. But to me, sometimes when somebody does something stupid or fucked up, when you get the explanation of why they're fucked up or why they did what they did, it at least explains it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're rooting for him now, but you at least kind of understand his character a little better.
Yeah, but we had that explanation some time ago, and we had hints of that very early on. But there's got to be a much bigger piece of this puzzle that we haven't gotten yet.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Because there's scenes where we see it where he's alone and he just seems in full on anguish, and he, especially the part where he's reading the book and he's just losing it. There's something bigger. There's something else that he's hiding. There's some other trauma that Montrose isn't talking about.
Anyone who has read the book, without spoilers, if you could put in the comments, is this Montrose's story arc book accurate? I am curious, or is this a deviation as far as like killing the siren, stuff like that? I'm just curious if it's book accurate. The final scene is William deciphering the word die, and then he freaks out. He's crying. He's all freaking out. He calls the woman in Korea, and he's panicking. How did you know? And then it basically cuts off. We get a preview for next week, which looks like it'll be entirely set during his time in the war. Any thoughts on that? I don't think they gave us enough to really truly know what it meant, but clearly he's been told he was special, or at least what's going on to some degree since before he even got there. He just apparently didn't believe it. What do you guys think about that?
Well, we see one scene that leaves some questions. As long as it's not like just produced by trauma or a bad dream or anything. If it's something that actually happens, where we see the woman that he was with, and we see the spider leg come out of her ear. Now I'm wondering what that's about. Whether
Yeah, the
she's
preview. Yeah.
she's something Eldrick or what? Because on the phone before, when he calls, when he dials in and everything, and he calls and he's talking to her, one of the last things he says is, "What are you?" So does he mean that because this actually happened, or just because it seems that she may actually be alive, possibly? We're left with a lot of mystery. It's hard to say.
Well, I think that, you know, given what little we know, it makes me super excited about next week. But I think that, like you alluded to, Larry, the Eldrick being, I don't think that she is, just some random fortune teller he met in Korea. I think that she is not necessarily an Eldrick messenger, but I think she's an Eldrick messenger. Like, she's the one that kind of put this kind of bug in his ear that, he is important to, this mission.
Oh, so we making dad jokes? Is that a pun?
No. But I think that she is very important, and I think that she, uh, I don't, I'm trying to think of just Eldritch beings. Like, I'm trying to think of a bunch of different ones. I was looking at some preview for the beta's out for that game, The Shore. So I was,
well, there's only one that we know that looks like a spider, and that's not Lovecraft. That's Stephen King. But
yes.
yeah.
So what else? What have I missed?
Well, there was the thing we were talking about at the very beginning when Ruby wakes up and she appears to be the sheriff from episode 2, which raises a lot of questions. And we did talk about that in some ways when we mentioned Miss Braithwaite being William. Now, here's the question. Depending on how this magic works, like, was the sheriff ever a person? And because we know the series is going to involve time travel in some way, shape, or form because of the orrery that they were looking for in the last episode. So the question is the sheriff a completely different person independent of Ruby, or is the sheriff only Ruby? Did we have maybe a bit of time travel in the second episode, for all we know? Especially given that Ruby is in a relationship to some degree with Braithwaite.
I don't necessarily see it as time travel. When I look at the orrery, I think of the episode of Avatar where they use the giant, you know, thing to basically predict when the next solar eclipse would be. So I don't know that they don't use that thing to help predict the future as opposed to travel in time. I think it may be useful for them to help predict.
Well, they use the words time travel in reference to the orrery. So given how straightforward magic has been so far, I'm assuming it's time travel. And if it is time travel, then in that case, it's a possibility. It's a possibility that when they meet the sheriff for the first time, they never really met the sheriff. They may have met Ruby. And
I'm not shooting down your theory. I'm just offering a slightly different one.
Yeah, that it could be like the orrery may be used to predict the future or shape the future in some way.
Well, yeah, because if you know what's going to happen, it helps you kind of get from point A. It helps you kind of shape it the way you want if you know what's a possibility, as opposed to, you're talking about multiple timelines. If you're able to say, well, if I do this, what would happen in the future on this day? It kind of helps you shape it to how you want things to happen. And that's when I see it, or when I think about the time travel, I'm not thinking of maybe going back in time or jumping into the future. I'm thinking more of a prediction type thing where they can help shape it how they want. Because,
well, I think there's a lot of hints though, and a device that looks like this particularly, you would think would be used more like what you're saying, but there are a lot of hints in this show that it is actual time travel, in my opinion.
Well, even at the very beginning when they, tried to sacrifice Atticus, it was almost like a portal through time. So I'm
Yeah,
not,
that's
like I
true.
said, I'm not shooting down the time theory. I'm just saying that the Ori, I don't know that that's the key to the time travel. I think it's more of a future predictor just because of other shows I've seen that
Hmm.
use those kind of things.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that
don't.
makes
As far as
sense.
time travel or what the Ori is going to be used for, I don't know. But I do find it. I agree. I find it odd. I don't necessarily think it's Ruby, but I do find it odd that it seems to be the sheriff from the second episode. Um, body that Ruby is inhabiting, her likeness. I don't know why. So yeah, that's something that I hope they explain. And obviously, if it is in fact Ruby and your theory is right, clearly it will be. How do you guys think about the idea that next week will, based on the trailer and just my assumption, will only focus on the Korean stuff? So we'll basically have to wait 2 weeks, 2 weeks before we dive into some of those other storylines.
I think just like this episode, although it focused mainly on Ruby, I don't necessarily think that this episode will only focus on Korea. If you watch the trailer for this episode, almost all of it showed Ruby. It showed, her in the lodge. They showed a lot of different things. They didn't show a lot of other storylines when they showed the preview for this week. So I think that they'll still probably carry on a couple different storylines, but it'll kind of be the reverse. Like how Ruby dominated this story, I think Atticus's story will dominate the next episode, but I do think there'll be a couple underlying storylines that they're going to push forward a little bit more next week also.
I agree with Spencer 100% on this one. I think that we're going to get flashes back to the war, and there'll be scenes where they're searching or they're analyzing the photos, and Atticus will zone out and he'll think back to that because he's still sort of traumatized from what he's deciphered and the phone call and everything, and he'll think back to those moments during the war, and it'll be 50-50 maybe between present day and flashback.
Maybe. I mean, we'll know in a week. I think Watchmen brilliantly had episodes where you would have sort of that standalone that would give you that backstory, and the way it told the story was brilliant. This may do the same thing. It might not. I don't know. I really regret we didn't do Watchmen. It's
Oh
something
yeah.
I think about as far as one of the, I think, best shows I've seen in the last 5-10 years. I really wish we had done it, but
Tried to tell you. It's about
Oh
the
yeah.
show, not
I
as
wouldn't
just
watch
a
it for
deal,
like
but
2 weeks. It was the showrunner. I told you I was really not happy with Lost, and I was just like, I didn't care. I didn't care
Well,
when I
I'll say
found out
I'll
it
say
was
this about
him.
the show too. The first two episodes of Watchmen. I know we're way off topic now, but the first two episodes of Watchmen were it was a little murky. You thought, where's this going? Okay, how does this tie to Watchmen? Is this going to tie to Watchmen at all? But after those first couple of episodes, and after it hit its stride and kind of became its own thing, but yet still fit very neatly into the Watchmen canon. It more than well, I would say it's the best sequel to the book you could have hoped for. It's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I agree. And on that note, yeah, I guess we're done. As I said before, everyone who's been commenting, upvoting these videos, we highly appreciate it. Keep the comments coming, keep the discussions going. If you agree with anything we said, let us know in the comments. If you think we're way off base on anything, let us know in the comments, and we'll try and respond. So,
just remember that everything Larry says is wrong.
Even though it always turns out to be right.
hey, I was right last week. Yeah.
About what, the music or the?
No, about the stairs. What house they were in.
I know. I agreed with you
Oh.
afterwards.
Oh
No,
yeah,
you
that's
didn't.
right. I gotta admit to that. I was absolutely wrong about those stairs. I didn't Scooby Doo
But
that
all
last
right.
episode and analyze the stairs.
See, if you're going to miss
All
something
right.
so glaringly obvious,
Like, how did
So
you not recognize?
yeah, look out for our Raised by Wolves review Thursday, our boys review next probably Saturday, and then obviously Lovecraft Country next Sunday. As I said, if you think we should, we're like I said, we're discussing. We're pretty sure we're going to be doing Fargo season 4. Let us know if you would be into that. Those would go up Monday evenings. So, all right, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Later.